Thanks for choosing this free Anfield Index podcast. If you'd prefer to listen to this or any of our other shows without adverts, then now's the time to check out Anfield Index Pro. With AI Pro, you can supercharge your entire listening experience. You'll not only get all of our podcasts without the ads, but you'll have them far faster with our quick publish feature available exclusively for subscribers. AI Pro also puts you in the heart of our sound studio, with an option to listen to many of our shows live and interact with the podcasters in real time as the shows are recording. Upgrading couldn't be easier. AI Pro is available on all popular podcast platforms, and we have our own apps for Apple and Android. Just head on over to AnfieldIndexPro.com and get started today.
Hello and welcome to your post-match Raw on AI Pro, podcasting to you from my field here in beautiful rural Ireland. I'm Trev Downey, and joining me to give their immediate reactions to Liverpool 2, Newcastle 1 in the Premier League from Anfield are Karl, Matchett and Chatra. Karl, you can take your Stan Collymore moment and stop replaying it and put it in the bin, because we have a dramatic Liverpool-Newcastle moment to top the very lot there. Whether it's deserved or not is almost irrelevant. We will get to that. It'll be part of our show. But what a way to end a game of football.
Absolutely beautiful. It could not have been any better whatsoever. I think the only thing I can really compare what happened here to is that beautiful, beautiful moment in the derby last season when Alisson slowly collapsed to his knees and then to the ground after Jordan Pickford had been doing it all game long. And then we went and took the lead. It was just the most perfect thing imaginable, because that entire game was an absolute horror show of them wasting time. You know, we can get to our own failings and that's fine, but they must have taken up about 6.5 weeks during that 90 minutes of just having cramp and having knocks to the head and facial injuries and God knows whatever else was going on. It was the most frustrating thing, and I'm absolutely delighted that we won it in the manner and with the time on the clock that we did.
Now, I've got to say, in a different situation, you could see how we could offload quite a lot of frustration and anxiety and rage onto Andre the Sailor Man there, in terms of how he dealt with said shithousing all the way through the game. It was beyond infuriating, and he seemed to have the level of control that one would expect of a newbie teacher going into a gang of reprobates on day one. It was quite sad to see, but we must also include the caveat that when it came to playing the letter of the law in terms of add-ons to the add-ons, he did actually okay by us in the end. The goal does not happen if he doesn't do what he did. In other words, play the time-wasting time that they actually managed to put in during the added time. That's what you know. Yeah, that leads to the opportunity for Fabio to do what he did. Just before I go to Mo to get his initial thoughts as well, you reckon we've plenty to talk about in terms of our own shortcomings on the night. It did have a couple of those flags, those little red flags. The concession of the goal, the inability to sort of get up ahead of steam, and the odd flatness in the crowd, those things all kind of combining. It's an uncomfortable watch when we're like that, Karl.
Yeah, I think uncomfortable is probably the right word, to be honest, because you know that there's so much more to see. There's so much more that everybody there is capable of. And I kind of feel like at the moment, the team playing patterns are there, but it's all at slow motion. And quite a few of those individuals within the patterns are not really on top of their game at all. And so all of that is like having a bit of a knock-on effect, so that it looks like Liverpool and you can recognise it as Liverpool, but it's just not as good as you expect it to be. It's not as effective as you expect it to be. And that is quite a frustration. I think you got to take positives at this point as well, and point to a few players like Harvey Elliott, again, outstanding. I thought he was absolutely everywhere today. So there are a couple of people who are trying to pick up the slack from one or two others, but we're about to enter the most ridiculous run of a season at this stage, which I can remember. You know, the continuity and the relentlessness of the fixtures which are now about to come on, and we really do need more individuals and thus the team as an entire working entity to be performing a lot better than we are at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair. And Mo, it would be silly of us to do anything other than be delighted in the wake of such a dramatic last minute win. Of course, we're going to revel in that, and we will have plenty of fun in picking out the good parts and dwelling on the end of the match. But we do have to be honest. And a Newcastle team shorn of possibly their three most valuable attacking assets, with their new signing coming in very last minute and making his first appearance, you couldn't have expected a whole lot from the guy. He came good, but they came good in a way as well. Yes, they were absolutely frustrating as hell. And as a result, I have no fondness for them. But they did play some decent football, and they kept a very, very high intensity in the game throughout and kept us under pressure. You'd have to say that there's a lot going on there that's right under Eddie Howe.
Yeah, I mean, the Newcastle tactics were very clear before the game had even started in terms of how they would set up, how they would put the time waste and frustrate. There is an absolute mountain of evidence now for opposition analysts and clubs to study and to understand how to get at Liverpool, how to negate our strengths, and that was deployed beautifully, certainly in the first half. If anything, they were the better team. They certainly, delivered to their end in a way that we couldn't. And, they did that in a way that is contrary to the kind of philosophical leanings of Eddie Howe. We know from his Bournemouth days that he does like to play a generally attacking, open style of football. And yet, he's studied the way that we are frustrated by teams that do, form a rigid shape and, defending numbers and, threw in ample amounts of time wasting from probably about the 5th minute onwards. So all of that was proving to be very effective, certainly in the first half. And in the second half, we were really made to work extremely hard to make any real headway. But, it was ultimately the result that counted. The performance certainly, in certain respects, left a lot to be desired in the first half. I thought we upped our game in the second, and overall, an absolutely delightful outcome. The finish was one that we'll remember for many a year. And most pleasing of all was the fact that, our two youngest players on the pitch made such a telling difference to get that victory. And, what's really important is it was more than just the 3 points. I think had we suffered yet another draw, lost further ground on those at the top end of the table, it would have been demoralising, especially in a week like this when there's so much noise on social media and elsewhere about the lack of activity in the transfer window. And the players are not oblivious to that. They are on social media just like the rest of us. And they see this negativity. And, for tonight at least, that has been lifted. And, we can enjoy what was an absolutely fantastic win in the end.
I'm glad you took it there, because we should just frame up the rest of the show with the elephant in the room, which is the ongoing will we, won't we, everyone watching press conferences, trying to interpret signs and signals and all sorts around midfield recruitment. We now are in possession of the knowledge post-match. Immediately post-match, Kloppo has said that the captain has a hamstring injury. The toll keeps on rising. There are some positive news about some guys coming back into the fold, but how long that will take, how long it'll take them to reacclimatize, and so on and so forth. So you can see, and Mo, you were right to say it earlier on before the mics went live. You can see actually the high that we're on now, and the fans will be on into tomorrow morning. You can see the arse dropping right out of that, can't you? If nothing happens, and with yet another fallen horse here, I guess the doom and gloom merchants might have a freaking point, Mo.
Yeah. I mean, look, this is yet another game this season where, certainly for crucial sections of the game, our midfield and one midfielder in particular left a lot to be desired. I thought the first half, there was real problems in the performance of Jordan Henderson. And it's just as well our esteemed colleague Dave Hendrick isn't here, because he would be absolutely tearing into shreds. And to be honest, the Henderson discussion has been done to death, and it was not, certainly in the first half, a strong performance or anything close to it by him, and that was part of the reason why we were struggling. And obviously he had a part to play in the Newcastle goal as well, which compounded the frustrations around the captain. But what it goes back to is the fact that we've seen it as a common theme now for a number of games, that kind of energy, that dynamism we see in the likes of Carvalho and Elliott are not there in those that have been getting more minutes in the centre of the park thus far this season. And, that has been adding to the clamour for an addition to the midfield. That, look, this midfield group that we have, in between injuries and players that are past their peak, are going to struggle this season against, other midfields from rival teams in particular, who have that greater level of energy, dynamism, and ultimately quality. And, it is a problem that Klopp will have to address. Obviously there's been a lot of discussion around that, and obviously we don't want to labour that point too much on this podcast, but we certainly saw evidence of the various concerns raised by large sections of the fan base in that first half, but fortunately the second half saw a turnaround, and driven by the least experienced of the midfielders in Elliott, who I thought second half was outstanding, and had Henderson not suffered that hamstring injury, with Thiago about to return, would have left Jurgen Klopp with a huge decision to make in terms of whether to retain Harvey in that right central midfield role, or to return Henderson to that position and drop Elliott to the bench. But I think on the evidence of the second half, he'd be a very brave manager, even Jurgen Klopp, to drop Harvey on that second half performance.
Yeah, I'd have to say for me, he was our most consistently effective footballer throughout. I thought he did excellently, and along with Luis Diaz, it's interesting that our three most notable footballers on the night are Harvey, Fabinho, who I thought was back to his best, bar some of his shooting, which is actually part of Fabinho's game, and the introduction of Carvalho, and that's a trio I wouldn't mind seeing in the derby against Everton. So just putting that out there into the universe for Klopp to get a little hold of. And Karl, let's have a quick look at the 11s before we get into the details of the match. I don't think there's any shock. I mean, you didn't have to be a genius to know that was the team Klopp was going to go with. There was almost no choice around it at all, bar perhaps he could have selected Milner for Henderson, but I don't really see that he had any other choice. Could Tsimikas have made a case? Again, I don't know. I thought Robertson had a very good outing the last day as well. So to me, that team was always going to be the team. Our bench on the day, for the record, in case people didn't see the game, we went with that same team again of Alisson, Trent, Gomez, Van Dijk and Robertson, Elliott, Fabinho, Henderson, Salah, Firmino and Diaz. And on the bench, we had Milner, Adrian, Jones, Simicas, Carvalho, Matip, Bajcetic, Phillips, and Davies. And that's not a bench that leads you to great amounts of excitement until it does. When in the shape of young Carvalho, 20, I think, all of a day, he lights it up. But where I'm interested in looking at with you is the Newcastle team. I heard yourself and Dave talk about this lot in advance of the game, and what he went with was Pope, Trippier, Lascelles and Byrne and Target, Willock, Longstaff and Fraser, Almiron, Isak and Joelinton. And I know you guys weren't sure if the deal even would be done or the paperwork signed and whatever the relevant things, box ticking exercises would have been done to get Isak onto the field. But, well, he made a hell of an impact. Joelinton continued to do his big man industry thing in the middle of the park to great effect, including his shithousing, to be fair. And on the bench now, they've got Botman and Schär, Ritchie and Lewis, Manquillo, Wood, Murphy, Darlow and Anderson. And considering the amount of money they have, and I think you'll agree with me on this, they still haven't gone out, obviously, and just splurged on getting names in at the set for the sake of it at a quick turnover. They're clearly trying to do something, and I wouldn't mind if you wouldn't mind trying to condense into a few sentences what do you think it is that Eddie Howe is trying to build there in terms of a system.
Yeah, I mean, I think the signing of Isak is a pretty smart one overall if we ignore the fact that he's obviously annoyed us for half a game tonight. We spoke about it in Scouted in that he can play multiple roles across that forward line. He gives them someone who can play either with or alongside Callum Wilson, or he can play off him or from the side of him, or as we've seen tonight, he can lead the line and give them a lot of what Wilson does in terms of a bit of pacing behind at times, someone who's not just going to represent an oak tree like Chris Wood tends to do. He's going to give them a bit more mobility in that forward line, which they definitely didn't have if he wasn't playing, especially since now they have got rid of perennial 4-time substitute a season Dwight Gale at long last. He's no longer in the Premier League. So they did need, as well as the added quality, obviously, they needed that more mobility and pace in attack. I think Isak is a little bit overpriced for obviously how much they paid for him and what he's done so far. But this is a smart move for a team who are, no question about it, going to get better in the coming years, because Isak is a player young enough to grow with them. He's able to be moulded into whatever kind of forward they really want him to be. And although he is obviously better than where, let's say, Newcastle were last year, he has not proven himself so much that Champions League teams were rushing out to sign him. That's quite evident by the fact that nobody was really willing to pay Real Sociedad what they wanted this summer, except for them. So I do like what they're doing in terms of the team building, trying to improve, let's say, at least one position in each line. I think Botman, Guimaraes and Isak are players who were above Newcastle station pre-takeover, let's say, but they're not so far advanced. They're not so big and so much better than everybody else, in the, let's say, the after 6th position in the league. They are good enough to be in that top 6, but they're not already definitely got to be Champions League players, except for Guimaraes. I think he probably should have done. But they're doing it nicely in stages. I think it's quite important that over the next couple of transfer windows, they improve the squad depth, because a couple of them that you mentioned there on the bench, you wouldn't really expect people like Javier Manquillo, we know very well, obviously, Karl Darlow, now that he's going to be the second choice goalkeeper. Matt Ritchie, I don't even think he should have been in the team before the takeover, to be honest, especially at left back at the very least. But these are the kind of players now that they'll have to upgrade next time. And assuming that they're going to stick with the same sort of system that they have at the moment, you can see what they're doing. They're hard working. They really fight for each other. They can all play a bit of football right the way through the lines. They've got a couple of really nice partnerships going on there as well. You look at sort of the work that Trippier and Almiron do, doubling up with each other. Joelinton, like you've mentioned, is kind of everywhere now. He's become this real phenomenal box-to-box player for them. And I must say, I do like the work that they've done. I don't like how they implemented it tonight necessarily, but you got to do what you got to do, haven't you? If you go to a club are going to have more ball than you, and they're going to have more attacking opportunities than you've got to come up with a game plan. And obviously we don't like it, and obviously there are ways to combat that, but you can't really deny that they had a plan which very, very nearly worked for them tonight.
Yeah, thanks for that. I appreciate that, because again, it's not everybody that gets to listen to everything, and it's nice to keep people in the loop. And with that in mind, Mo, just seeing as we're sort of milking the expertise of the panel here, what do you make, just again in brief, of the approach taken by the newly moneyed Newcastle? Do you see a method to it? Are you impressed or unimpressed? Do you expect the spending to ramp up all of a sudden? Is there some sort of a sort of slowly and then splurge, or do you think it's going to continue in this more methodical way?
Well, I mean, it seems methodical, but then they have spent more in the last 8 months than we as a club have in the last 4 years. So,
Fair.
They spent, I think, well, certainly in excess of £200 million since the January transfer window opened, some 8-9 months back. So, they will ramp it up, though. This is just the start, and it seems low key. And I think what I'm impressed by is the fact that they aren't going for superstar signings in the way that a club who should know better in a Manchester United might do and have done. A lot of their buys seem to be quite astute. Guimaraes clearly oozing in quality. Isak, also a player that I think will add a lot to the Premier League, and I expect them to follow that up with more business, perhaps not to the same extent in January, but I think that if they manage to get into the top 6 or 7 and get into Europe next season, we can expect 3 or 4 pretty hot talents coming in to augment the group that they've already put together, which in itself is starting to look quite impressive. Certainly 2 years from now, I am worried about what this team will be. And by that point, Eddie Howe may have moved on. They might look to bring in somebody with a bit more gravitas, more established, more of a track record at the top level. But I think they are doing things in the right way, and obviously there's plenty of discussion to be had around where the money is coming from and who the owners really are. And there's certainly unsavoury aspects to that. But in terms of the way that Newcastle as a club are going about their business, I'm quite impressed, and I'm worried at the same time.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will have similar thoughts. I like your observation on Eddie Howe as well. I mean, for all the plaudits and admiration, I don't think he stands a chance of being there in 2 years if they do continue to bring in the very high level, a high caliber of talent that they will be hoping to. I could be wrong. Maybe I'm doing the man a terrible disservice, but I would imagine it will go the way that we might expect it there and that you have suggested. I'll stay with you, Mo, to talk about the start of the first half, begun by Mr. Andre the Sailor Man, when he blew his whistle, and within 2 minutes, Luis Diaz had a ball into Mo Salah, but he couldn't quite get there. Trent did quite well against Fraser on 6 minutes. I pick these things out because I'm always looking for good examples of Trent defending. And not only did he sort of win the ball back, but launched a counter-attack. Harvey Elliott's first really impressive moment was a crossfield ball to Robbo on 7 minutes. Absolutely class, as was pretty much everything the kid did tonight. There was a little Henderson dink over the top, which actually almost got Luis Diaz in on 8 minutes, on 10, after Mo Salah was assaulted not once, but twice. They had a counter, and Isak cut in from the left-hand side and blasted wildly over. But it was a little bit of a sign of what was to come. Now, at this point as well, I've made the observation about sort of 12, 13, 14 minutes in. If Fabinho is balling, then the Reds are balling. And that's basically what you see here. Him setting tempo, him getting his foot in, him being able to sit at the base of a midfield and be both creative and effective as a shield. And it was nice to see. those who are inclined to look less favourably on his pal who was on the left in the 8th position might have suggested that a lot of stuff started to slow down as he takes a touch and turns back into himself or whatever. It's not all the time at all. And sometimes the captain's passing is very progressive, but it was quite notable that the difference between the two of those guys in terms of the nature of how they received and dealt with the ball in those opening stages was quite contrasting. The dinked balls towards the goalkeeper are quite frustrating. Bobby Firmino, worthy of many mentions. I was hopeful that what we saw the last day was a renaissance, and I thought he was outstanding today. Really good linking play, coming back into the midfield, winning tackles, regaining possession, incredible passes, and there when you need him as well at the sharp end. Tremendous stuff. We're going to take it through another little couple of minutes here. 17, there's a ball into Fraser from the left-hand side. He swiveled and shot over narrowly. He had a little bit too much space for my liking, Mo, I have to say. It just seemed too simple. A ball into a lad who's floating in the middle in plenty of space. Time to swivel and shoot. I didn't like it. A good read by Trent on 19 to kill a counter-attack. He swept in, sort of coming across from the his side across over towards Robbo's side. He did really well. Launched a bit of a count. And on 19 minutes, we saw Luis Diaz carry the ball, pull over a centre, but it was just behind Mo Salah, who was, I thought just poor on the night. That's the first 20, Mo. If there's anything you want to pick out of it, feel free to do that. If there's anything you want to comment on, feel free to do that. If there's nothing there, also feel free to do that.
Yeah, so, I mean, I agree with, a point you make about Mo. I think that, again, his position too far from goal, and in the Discord group, I was having a bit of a discussion with Gags about, well, is that Mo or is that more of a tactical thing where he's following instruction? His Gags' view was that it was more a tactical thing, following instruction, and that for me seems almost balmy that our most potent attacking threat, it's kind of taken out of the game almost by being played so far away, so far out wide, and on top of that, and it's something we've seen throughout, well, for much of 2022. Mo seems to be overcomplicating his game as well, taking too many touches, lingering a bit too ponderous on the ball. Some of that quick movement that we have been used to seeing from him over the years, really not very obvious in that first half at all. And that was concerning. And then on top of that, as you noted, some fine play from Bobby, but again, in terms of being a goal threat, less so, albeit obviously we went on to score the equaliser later on. But I thought our standout from an attacking perspective was Diaz, who certainly seemed the liveliest, right from the start of the game all the way throughout. So I thought he had yet another very strong game. But it wasn't quite as high a tempo a start to the game as I would have liked to have seen coming off of the Bournemouth performance. And that, I think, contributed to the atmosphere perhaps becoming a bit subdued earlier than I again anticipated. I thought that before the game started, Anfield sounded loud and vociferous, and under the lights, the atmosphere is normally pretty strong, but it kind of fizzled out pretty quickly. And when that happens, then it tends to then filter onto the pitch, and so some of our play, in those opening stages were not the most inspiring, and it certainly played well into tactics that Newcastle looked to deploy.
I'm glad you said that about the atmosphere, because sometimes I feel like I'm banging a solitary tambourine on this, and it's not to be critical. I mean, I know what it's like to be in the ground when it's tense and you can feel anxious and you don't really feel like doing anything, and it's not about telling people how to support, but it doesn't help. It really doesn't help, I have to say. Karl, as we move from that point, I think we can go at least as far as the goal and maybe just the rest of the half, because there aren't that many incidents of note which come after that, but there are actually some things to talk about. There was on the 24th minute a corner from which we got nothing, and then I've noted down that these are time wasting, and that's at the 25th minute mark. Mariner, of course, is given nothing. He's not pulling anyone up on it. It's so blatant. It's so obvious. And again, you would like to see some refereeing sort of fortitude, some sort of intervention around that, but there's nothing. We see this all the time now. And I guess teams understand that if you break up our rhythm and our flow, that's a good way to impact a result against us. So it's not so much that I blame Newcastle. I don't have to like them. I don't have to like it. I don't. But in terms of blaming them, it's not really the point. It should be dealt with. It's not. There is an opportunity on 28 minutes for them where Trippier hits a free kick, but it's straight at Alisson. Mo, to be fair to the lad, even though he wasn't good tonight, he was getting assaulted again and again. Another thing that referees completely fail to deal with. This is not red tinted lenses. He gets pulled and dragged all over the place. It's just allowed. In basketball in the States, I've watched several documentaries recently where, I mean, they go out of their way, referees, to almost ignore when the star players commit fouls and to give fouls on the star players. It's the exact antithesis where Mo Salah is involved. 29 minutes, there's a kind of a penalty shed. We didn't see a replay until much later. When I did see it, the ball does drop from Burns' chest onto his hand. Would have been tough. But it's the assault beforehand that I was thinking of. 33 minutes, there's a brilliant turn and a pass by Harvey Elliott to Bobby Firmino. His beautiful through ball is fantastic. Luis Diaz is coming in from the left and he takes it past the keeper out to the right and he tries to hook it back towards goal, but unfortunately kind of slices it, gets under it, and it goes over the top. It's a fantastic move, our best moment of the game, no doubt. They continue with their endless fouling and shithousing between that and 37 minutes where Isak puts them ahead, and it just has this horrible gloomy feel to it. Now, after that, all I've got is that really impressed by Harvey Elliott, and we had something like 11 to 9 corners in the added time at the end of the first half, which was added on because they were shithousing and time wasting. But around the goal itself, we should talk a little bit about this. Karl, and Mo can have his tuppence worth as well if he wants. There's a lot of sloppiness. It begins with Trent's crossfield ball that's intercepted by Willock. I've seen a very simple version of that, which came from a colleague of yours who said Trent's sloppy ball was intercepted and Fabinho didn't track his man and Liverpool concede. There's a lot more to it than that, and I'm sure you're going to take us into the detail. Willock does launch the attack. It ends up down our right-hand side. Eventually, Longstaff plays a through ball into an unmarked Isak, who's made a very good run, to be fair to the lad, but it's not rocket science. He went into a gap that existed, and he finished beautifully past Alisson. You have to say, I don't know who was it on Sky. It could have been Shay Given, I think, who was talking about it from a keeper's point of view. Like, he was saying that's one of the best goalkeepers in the world. You're 1v1 with him, and Alisson might as well not have been there. It is a tremendously taken finish, to give the kid his credit, and a really good run, great through ball. All of the things that Newcastle did were good. Most of the stuff we did, if not all of it, around the concession of it was bad. Talk us through it from your perspective.
A bit of a mess and a muddle. Obviously, Trent's pass in the first place led to it, but it's not at that point where there's immediate danger. It's not at that point where it's a goal-scoring opportunity. Virgil has to go over to the left-hand side, and he sort of follows play out a little bit to prevent them going back in. And when that happens, other people have to step in and fill gaps which have been left behind. Now, in the first instance, this does happen because Henderson is slightly tucked in left of centre. Fabinho has dropped slightly deeper into where, more or less, where Van Dijk would have been. But the problem comes after that pass when Van Dijk is not there, and then it goes into a sort of deep midfield area. And at that point, Henderson and Fabinho have to be on the same wavelength here, and probably Joe Gomez has to be a little bit more aware of what's happening as well. We did not have a very good line. That's the first thing. If we're going to try and either catch people offside or keep space in behind for Alisson to come out or anything like that, people have to be in a line, and nobody was whatsoever. But the bigger thing was that Henderson and Fabinho had to do one of two things. One had to go to the ball and one had to stay. Instead, what we got was, one had to go to the ball and one had to drop to follow the runner, or to hold a line which did not exist at that moment. So what then happened was Fabinho, who was deepest, stepped out. That left an even bigger gap behind, obviously. And Henderson then really needed to drop behind Fabinho. And he didn't. He stayed exactly where he was and did nothing of the sort. So you can take your pick who you want to blame for that goal. The problem was shambolic defending by the team. Nothing to take away at all from Isak. I think his two shots tonight were pretty good after his first one, which was wild. Finish was really, really good. It's not something you always get from Isak, to be perfectly honest. So really great moment for him, obviously, in front of their fans as well. Nothing that Alisson could do about it. I don't really think Alisson did much of anything tonight. Nothing particularly great, nothing particularly bad at all, but it's not much he could have done. That was of our own making. We put ourselves in a bad position and we never got ourselves back organised again after.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, and in terms of your analysis around the concession of the goal, and in terms of that first half as a whole, I mean, I think it's fair to say there was certain amounts of the correct kind of thing going on from Liverpool, but it was just that little bit toothless. Like I say, I think it's well into that first half where we have our first really proper moment where that Bobby threw a ball. And the Diaz effort over the top. That's after the half-hour mark. So, it's understandable that people were a little bit gloomy in terms of their take on that first half. And Mo, in terms
it's not enough, Trev. It's not really enough, though, is it? You're just coming back off the back of a 9-0 win at home, and it's against a team who has started really well and was unbeaten coming into that match. You would expect more from Liverpool, and even with players out, even with the situation of the season as it has started, you do expect more from Liverpool. And I completely agree with what you've said about the crowd, where it's has gone a bit flat a bit early on and all the rest of it. But that has stemmed from the performance level. It's the energy levels again and the lack of tempo that we've had in the game. You cannot rely every single time on the crowd to lift you, just like you cannot rely every single time on the team to start in a perfect manner. But when it has happened a bit too often at the start of the season, and when there's not an immediate remedy to that, I'm more inclined to put the emphasis of needing, or the burden of needing to rectify that on the team itself.
I think that's absolutely fair, and just for the record, and I'll hop this question off Mo as well before we start the second half. Any sort of insight as to what might be going on, Karl? I mean, like I've heard an awful lot of talk. I think because it's just a handy one to go to about fatigue, about the exertions of last season and so on and so forth. I'm not buying any of that, I'll be honest. People are blaming the injuries in that as well, but maybe it's valid. I don't know, but I have a higher level of expectation from those guys on that field in terms of what they're producing. Any takes on what might be the malaise there?
So I have said on one of the Raws that we did recently, I think that for the first couple of games, this group of players has struggled to come to terms with a little bit with not having won games as almost robotically, and I mean that in a good way, as they have been doing previously in previous seasons. It wouldn't be a surprise, like if after the Man City game and we beat them, and it's quite positive and optimistic, and then you kind of feel like you're going to go not into autopilot, but into your rhythm straight away, and not have to go above and beyond. And maybe a few of them forgot that you do have to. Every single game, you've got to be right on top. Otherwise, teams in the Premier League will beat you, or will frustrate you, or will not let you play your game. And I think a couple of them probably did struggle with that. And when you add in the fact that we've had so many injuries, it's not the fact that we don't have options to change the game. We don't, but I don't think that that's so much the case as it's relying on the starters to immediately be very, very good, which not everybody is all the time. So we use the bench for that reason. You're relying on a group of players to perform at the highest level they can without any competition for places. Because like we've said again today, that we're never going to change the team. What we're going to do, bring in Milner for Henderson? That's it. That's pretty much the only option you've got. So there's no competition for places pushing people to play at their absolute limit. There's a lack of overall energy and intensity about the performance levels, which is something the players have to do themselves, but comes from confidence and rhythm and being on top form. And when you're playing just completely naturally, like people like Javier, you can see he's not tired. And there's no reason that, let's say, who's had a nice summer off? Pretty much all of them, in fact, because not too many of them have played too much over the summer. Anyone who hadn't played loads and loads last season, like, there's no reason why Jordan Henderson should be tired. Right? He's not had a grueling 8 months and come straight back into the season or anything like that. So no, I don't think tiredness or fatigue is a factor at this point. People have been subbed off because they've not been playing well. People have been subbed off and taken out of the team because they've not been showing the levels required to get victories. And I think that if we had a much fuller squad, one, we would have made more changes than we have done. And two, we probably wouldn't have anyway, because those players who were in the team would have been pushed more, would have been playing harder, would have been subbed off earlier, and other people come in and make the case to show exactly what's needed and so on. It's all had a bit of a knock-on effect. I don't think there's a single reason for it, but fatigue at this stage is a stupid thing to suggest, in my opinion. And now that we're getting a few of them back, I wouldn't be surprised to see an uptick, but it has to be also as a result of, taking the confidence from this really late win and, hopefully beating Everton 5-0 at the weekend and that kind of thing. And you build it up bit by bit. We were there for so long. And maybe when you lose it all in a row at the start of the season, it takes a little bit to get it back.
Yeah, it's funny. I was hoping the reset moment would be the dramatic and very very emphatic win against Bournemouth, but maybe it's more that our ID, our DNA, the thing that makes us a team, is moments like the very final seconds of this match, and that might be the trigger. Again, we're sort of grasping at straws a little bit here, Mo, and it's not to be gloomy, but we have to talk about what actually happened on the night, and we're going to go into the second half now, and it's going to be mostly good stuff, and we're building up towards, I definitely want to have quite a deep, a good chat around some of the events around the goal as well that wins it. But just to give you your tuppence worth on what you think is going on at the moment. I'm sure you've heard all the things that myself and Karl discussed there, from theories being floated by various people. What do you reckon it is? Again, just an accumulation of the bad luck of the injuries and not having the players available to rotate and to keep that pressure on, plus perhaps some distinct underperformance by certain individuals, or is there something a little bit more insidious that you'd be worried about?
I think it's a variety of factors, such as the ones that Karl touched upon. I think that, sport generally, but football in particular, can be very influenced by confidence, and there can be factors that can significantly affect confidence. And, I hate to go back to it, but recruitment is one of them. Now, Virgil van Dijk, in the last few days, did publicly come out and talk about midfield. And when, he, as one of the top players within our squad, he's publicly talking out and essentially saying, look, we need more here. We need more depth, more quality, more bodies. Then it suggests that within the squad there is a feeling that we've got quality in goal, between the sticks, at the back, in the front line, perhaps in the middle of the park. Yes, we've got Fabinho and Thiago, but beyond that, yes, there is still quality there. But either there's issues around injuries, or age, or inexperience even, which means that we can't necessarily rely upon others to perform consistently, and that is ultimately what we need to do. We're up against an absolute juggernaut in Manchester City, and if we want to win the title this season and in future seasons, we know we have to go at levels that are unprecedented in the history of the Premier League. We need to be racking up 90 plus points just to give ourselves a chance, never mind to win the league. So when some players in the squad aren't seeing the club, for whatever reason, get certain business done, I think that can have a demotivating effect in the same way that a club like Arsenal bringing Gabriel Jesus in can have an uplifting effect on that team. So I think that's a contributing factor. And also let's quickly touch on the intensity thing. I was reading a tweet from our colleague Dan Kennett, and he noted that in the first 4 games of the season, or first 4 match days of the season, we were 17th in the Premier League for high intensity meters, whereas last season, the season before, we were in the top 2. So that shows there's been a clear drop off in that intensity that we know Pep Lijnders love to talk about as well. And I think there are a variety of factors. I don't think it's just one thing, but certainly the injury situation hasn't helped, and that is a subject which perhaps hasn't really been touched upon enough in terms of what the root cause is. Because with the captain's hamstring, that's the sixth hamstring injury in the last 6 weeks, which is freakishly high for any squad. So it's not great. We do need to do something, and it's not just about recruitment. It's about looking at all the other factors that are causing us to not perform in terms of intensity and that kind of energy that we normally expect of this group. And we need to address it very, very quickly, because if we don't, sure, we won tonight, but we have got some tough games coming up over the next several weeks as well. And we certainly don't want to be losing further ground on City, or for that matter, other teams above us.
A few things on what you said there. It's becoming increasingly clear that the witch that Kloppo was talking about in the building needs to be eradicated by Bruce Grobbelaar pissing on the goalposts again or something, because that run of luck is getting daft. It's good to hear Dan's statistical analysis and scientific analysis backing up the eye test, because that's what we've been seeing, and it's good to know that you're not mad, because other people would tell you were, to suggest there might have been a lack of effort. Klopp himself called that out. So again, like I say, that's nice to hear, sort of that there's empirical evidence for that type of thing as well. And just before we move into the second half, 2 managerial quotes you might find interesting. Eddie Howe has the audacity to say about the time wasting: "It's a Premier League game. There's so much fatigue. They had one more day rest than us. There was no gamesmanship from us. It was tired bodies." All right, Eddie, fine. That's fine. We'll go with that. And Kloppo, this is from via Neil Bad News Jones, asked if he expects deadline day transfers. "I don't think so," says Klopp. "But as long as there's time, we should not close the door completely." So maybe start getting those, start bracing yourself for tomorrow's absolute shit show on the Bird app. Let's barrel into the second half and take what we can out of it. And we build up, Mo, myself and yourself, up to the first goal, which is Bobby Firmino's. There came out in the second half immediately doing the time wasting, which Eddie Howe calls fatigue. Nothing much happens. There is a ball. The ball's in the back of the net from Isak after 54 minutes. To be fair, he did his part really well. Did our defence up like a kipper. He's offside. But frankly, my reaction to that was, if you'll pardon my industrial language, fuck this. I was fuming at how easy it was for him to get through us again and to get his finish away. I'd like to think that was a rocket for us. I don't know if it was or not. On 59 minutes, Harvey has a dig. It's a sort of a low-driven effort. after a Mo Salah, either deliberate or deliberate layoff. There was a ball into him and it drops down to Harvey, who takes a touch and has his dig. But the Pope, who was very good all night, gets down. But a minute later, we are 1-1. It is Bobby Firmino. And Mo, you take it away. Describe the goal to us and what you made of it.
Yeah, delightful. Again, started by Elliott with a really nice pass to Mo, and Mo cut it back in, and a finish from Bobby that harkened back to his very late goal against Paris Saint-Germain in the Champions League at the start of the 1920 season, from virtually the identical spot on the pitch. So a really, really good move, and it was exactly what we were missing in the first half. That kind of movement is what unlocks, that kind of defensive shape that, Newcastle deployed superbly well in the first half. And I was delighted for, Bobby as well. I mean, I'll admit I've been one of the people that have been saying that, he's done, he's past it. But in the last couple of games, he's once again come out fighting and, silence critics such as myself. With back-to-back very strong performances. So that was a really, really lovely goal. And, it was this sort of thing that, was needed because, Anfield wasn't really drumming up that kind of atmosphere in the opening 15 minutes that perhaps we would have hoped for. So they kind of were induced out of that coma of sorts to once again make some noise and the atmosphere, certainly in the final 30, what was better than it had been for the first 60. So, all credit to the three in terms of the finish, the assist, but that lovely pass from Elliott set it up beautifully.
Absolutely, and so pleased for Bobby Firmino. I have to say, when we needed him last time out and this time, he's absolutely been fantastic, I think, and credit where it's due in that regard. A lot of people were worried, including myself, that we might not have seen, or we might have seen the very best of that guy, but I thought he was great. Really, really classic Firmino performance tonight, and great to top it off with that beautiful sweeping finish to put us back level. And Karl, as we progress through the rest of the game, I mean, it is quite an interesting. I think our pals in BT were very excited by what they were seeing anyway, in terms of it being a decent game for a neutral. Mo Salah picks up a foul versus Burn on 71 minutes. I think that might be the first one he got. It was a free on the right side. Nothing came of it. We were getting some momentum then immediately after that, and at one point, Lascelles and Joe Linton went down. They forgot to do it separately. They both went down at the same time, just falling on the ground. And again, Andre Mariner completely incapable of dealing with it. 78 minutes, Luis Diaz cuts in, stung Pope's hands with a dig, another corner, nothing from that either. On 80, good work by Harvey. There's a centre by Mo Salah, and Luis Diaz's shot is sort of partially blocked on its way towards goal and dealt with. 82, free from the right, dropped to Fabinho. His half volley was quite wild and over the top. 83 minutes, they bring on Anderson for Almiron. On an 85, Tsimikas has a header, and then another Fabinho long range effort, this time from the far side, the left hand side of the pitch, of the box rather. It's well over the top again. Lascelles picks up a yellow for a reckless tackle on Harvey Elliott, and then Murphy kicks the ball away, but Mr. Mariner doesn't see that. And there was several individuals kicking the ball away at this stage as well, and again, none of them got spoken to even. There's a Tsimikas corner in 89 minutes, which goes straight into the keeper after some really great work by Harvey Elliott to earn the corner. And again, a moment just to pause and say how good he was on the night. Just his ball retention, his usage, the bravery of his play. He took a ball at one stage and in the middle of the park and just turned away from a player, almost Thiago-esque, and set up a great move. Milner creates an opportunity on 89 minutes with a free kick. It's quite clever, a little dink into Fabio Carvalho, who was making a move towards the left-hand side of the penalty box, but he couldn't screw his shot on target. There were 5 minutes added. Obviously, keepers down for about half of those. And on 96 minutes, there was a corner from a decent ball by Bobby Firmino into Mo Salah, and an effort led to a corner. And the match finishes after another couple of minutes of terribly frustrating Reds football, where we're sort of playing it over around at the back and not just launching it and not committing men forward and all that type of thing. I understand what I'm saying. I know how old-fashioned and agrarian and uncultured that sounds, but I found myself apoplectic watching those last few minutes as we were sort of tipping the ball from side to side and waiting for the perfect angle to launch the diagonal ball to a load of short lads in against a load of fucking monstrous grocks. I mean, it was always going to be a breaking ball anyway. So, I mean, I found that infuriating. However, the goal when it comes is a joy. Now, I've loads I want to say about the aftermath. So, Karl, I'll let you describe the goal if you wouldn't mind, because I believe we have to credit Mo Salah with an assist. And also, just before you go there, if there's anything you want to pick up on in that longish run of time that I mentioned there, which was a frustrating spell for us, feel free to do that.
I'd first like to pick up on Eddie Howe's point, I think, about the Premier League industry and fatigue that his players are suffering, which included Jamal Lascelles, who didn't play at the weekend and came into the team to largely stand still at centre-back and repel things. His goalkeeper, who does not run during the match at all and has absolutely nothing to do other than stand and jump. So again, devastating fatigue that both of those must have been suffering. Joelinton, you could almost understand it, other than, usually after the game he runs home, including from away matches. And also the fact that all of about 4 days ago, it was quite funny that it was also 1-1 and also in the closing stages of the game, but he seemed to be the one who was charging around the pitch all over the place as they sort out a late winner themselves against Wolves. But obviously the grass at Anfield must be a lot more, I'm not sure if sticky is the word, or greater friction on it, and soul sapping and energy debilitating and all the rest of it. So we're obviously not using the same stuff in Merseyside as they do at Molineux. So maybe something to look into for next season. Maybe that's contributing to our own energy levels. Who knows? I was about to swear lots, get very, very angry, and actually publish quite a few pieces when Joe Gomez decided to shoot on the volley from about 25 yards out. This is a guy who has never scored in his professional career, and it did not seem completely likely that it would end up in the back of the net, I'll be honest. But I held off. I did the right thing. I kept Origi against Everton in mind, even though I don't actually think I genuinely thought we were going to do it this time. The goal itself, I don't want to be mean here, but Mo Salah, when the ball was dropping to him a couple of times, he kind of looked like, one of your little cousins when they come over and they're just learning how to play football, but they don't actually want to head the ball. And he was kind of jumping towards it, but also getting himself out of the way of it a little bit as well. Thankfully, I'm not sure if it was maybe Murphy or someone like that got half a back heel to it or something, which kind of put it back in play instead of sending it to Nick Pope. And if it was most of the senior players on the team that ball fell to, I'm telling you that they either try to cushion it in or tap it in or find a corner or something like that. And there's a good chance that Pope saves it. But because it's this kid, it's one of the few really young players, completely fearless players that we have in the team. He has just belted it as hard as he can. And it's an absolute thunder bastard. In off the bar, absolutely perfect. And that is probably the loudest I've heard Anfield. I'm not sure. I think it outscreamed the last day of the season when a few people thought we were going ahead in the table. But I think too many people already knew that we weren't at that point. That was a very, very loud one. That one was kind of Dortmund last minute sort of explosion of noise there. It was very, very nice to witness. And I think there might be some holes in my desk as well.
The underside of the bar thing was added spice for sure. I really enjoyed that aspect of it. I loved, and you're right, I loved the just youthful abandon that he wellied it in with as well. I mean, it's glorious. I have to say, it took me a long time to understand what had happened. You know, I was processing there for a while, probably out of just shock and fear that, you know, VAR are going to say something. There's so much in the aftermath of the goal that I want to talk about. And Mo, I'm going to get your last minute thoughts in a minute, but I want to let you talk about the goal as well, because we'll all have different takes. So both Karl and I have kind of focused on the delight of Fabio's execution of it, the fact it hits the bar. But there are other lovely things around it as well. For example, the absolute glorious vista of broken Newcastle lads just bent over, kneeling down, heads and hands in the immediate aftermath of it, just framed by their own goal. I have to say that's a delight as well. Just a little take from you on the goal before you and I then wrap up and get your final thoughts, and I'll finish the show with Karl.
Yeah, just desserts. It was absolutely wonderful for, you know, taking time wasting to new limits throughout the game, and the post-match meltdown as well. You know, Alan Shearer going on about, I thought it was only 5 minutes of additional time, conveniently ignoring the fact that Nick Pope spent at least 2 minutes of it sat down on the floor pretending to be injured with a shoulder injury after spending a good couple of minutes at the start of the first half, sat down, pretending to be dizzy or whatever he was pretending to be. So, you know, it was all of this shithousery coming back to bite them in the arse. And, you know, they had literally no time to do anything about it, because, you know, moments after the game resumed, it came to a halt. And it was absolutely one of the glorious moments of recent years at Anfield. And it was, you know, like I touched upon earlier on, you know, just the thing we needed going into the game this weekend against that other team of utter shithouses in Everton. You know, we're going to see more of the same and then some. You know, they're a team full of complete undesirables, you know, divers, cheaters, time wasters, you know, from 1 to 11. So, you know, this game today, if anything, was a nice warm-up to that one. And certainly we'll all be absolutely buzzing, especially in that dressing room, after that outcome, that glorious finish. And, you know, Carvalho did really show that he had something about him, didn't he? You know, that finish was sublime, and, you know, the timing of it, the execution, you know, albeit it was from, you know, very close range, it still, you know, needed the right technique to get it in, and, you know, in off the crossbar, leaving Nick Pope with no chance. You know, it was an absolute picture. So joyous, limbs everywhere, as the saying goes, and you know, great end to the game.
Absolutely. A moment for the ages. There's no two ways about it, and I hope everybody enjoys the hell out of it. Interestingly, Mo, you may be news to you or not, depending on whether you're following along or keeping your eye on various monitors as we do the show. It may be interesting to you to note that I think it might well be Joel Matip, the man, the myth, the legend, who causes the fracas with his bizarre going down on his hands and knees and banging the ground celebration. That seems to infuriate the bejesus out of the Newcastle bench, who then I've seen individual things showing them throwing things at the Liverpool bench, a couple of lads in Newcastle tops. So it'd be interesting to see if there's any further aftermath from that. But why am I not surprised that it's Joel Matip who's front and centre in terms of being just gloriously odd and winding up people to no end, and then Kloppo staring at them with his big smiling Tiny Head is great stuff too. I do want to. Oh my God, that picture Karl's just put into the thread here, where you've got two Newcastle lads completely prostrate, not prostate, with Fabinho standing between them, and as Karl says, that's not even after the goal. It sums the game up beautifully. Mo, to get your final thoughts down on it, and do also please let us know if there's anything coming up from you around the financial side of the game, as your Money Talk show is such a popular sporadic event on Field Index. Just your sum up thoughts and let us know what's coming up from you.
Yeah, so clearly the result that was the key today. Performance, certainly first half, show that there is still several levels that we need to climb before we get back to our imperious best. And whether that's an incoming, whether that's returning players that have been sidelined, whether that's changing the way we're setting up tactically, or a combination of all of those. But as I said, we do need to address it very, very quickly, and hopefully Klopp will show the kind of humility to try and deal with these matters. So, that was the key thing today. It was about the 3 points. Had we lost further ground on City, any faint hope of winning the title this season, pretty much for me would have been gone. But we're still in with a chance, a slim chance, albeit, even though there are still 33 games to go. So there's that. The one thing I did want to mention, though, and just to end it on a bit of a sour note before I get my plug in, is Andrew Robertson. I thought, again, sure, he played well at the weekend against Bournemouth, but for me, another subpar performance from him. And a lot of his performances over the last 18 months, coming up to 2 years, have not really been at the standards we've seen from him 18, 19, 19, 20, 17, 18. So, for me, I think there is certainly an argument that Tsimikas deserves to start some games. And I thought when he came on in the second half, he showed me a bit more than Andrew Robertson did when he was on the pitch. A bit more energy, a bit more creativity, and I think he deserved a chance at least. So let's see what happens on that front. But overall, delighted with that finish to the game, and that's one that will live long in the memory. In terms of Money Talks, I will be joining Eddie on Friday this week, after the transfer window slams shut, to reflect on incomings and outgoings from a financial perspective, and if we haven't spent as much as we thought we might, or that we perhaps could have done, why the reasons might be for that to have happened. So it'll be a financial reflection on the transfer window with Eddie and myself this Friday. So that's one for our listeners to look forward to.
Absolutely. I hope you have something to talk about that's upbeat, because otherwise I would happily suggest that you should take a few live phone calls, and I'll come on as, I don't know, Martin from Leicester and give out hell, because I'd imagine it would be quite entertaining if you're going to be doing it. I can imagine the fume will be high, so hopefully there'll be something that drops in the last minute. And hopefully it's not Douglas Luiz from Aston Villa, because why? Anyway, let's thanks for that, Mo, and we'll finish, Karl, with yourself and your final thoughts before you let us know what it is that's coming up from you.
Final thoughts. I think we've pretty much covered quite a few times the same thing this season, that there are definite improvements that need to be made, that we can see that there's a bit of a disconnect in the midfield balance at the minute. I completely agree on Andy Robertson as well. I don't think either fullback played well at all today. I think it was completely the right call. And I forgot to mention it earlier on, actually, that Trent didn't have a good game. His deliveries were not good. The set pieces from both of them were pretty poor. It was a big call to take off both our fullbacks, considering how important they've been tactically. But I think that's one Klopp got absolutely spot on. add in the captain as well. And that triple change was obviously a very big decision to make. And even if it wasn't for the injury, it's one that had to be made. It was the right one to be made. Klopp has said after the game that Elliott was the best player on the park, which I'm very glad to hear the reaffirmation of, if you like, because I think he's been our best player this season, full stop. And just a couple of oddities to finish up with, as usual. Roberto Firmino, obviously not very heralded for goal scoring, but just like he was for a little bit last season, he's now our joint top scorer and is averaging a goal every about 120 minutes of play, which is pretty nice for him, to be honest. Mohamed Salah didn't have a good game at all today, and yet ends the match with 2 assists. So there you go. That's how stats work in this day and age for Liverpool, when things just happen because they happen. Fabio Carvalho, 14 touches of the ball, and probably the hardest one anybody will hit all season long. I don't really have too much else to offer you in the statistical world today. What's coming from me, I've got a big American transfers piece which came out this morning on The Independent, which would be very nice if people decide to read that. And I will have stuff on the weekend ahead and all the Champions League bits. And I'll be doing Scouted with Guy, I think, for Everton.
Yes, absolutely. While Dave is recuperating and hopefully on his way back to recovery quickly, we look forward to listening to yourself and Guy on that. And make sure you're reading all the writings of Mr. Matchett on a regular basis, because he's one of the few who gets it. Similarly with Mo, those shows are always sort of landmarks and very interesting and engaging. And hopefully, like I said, there'll be a little bit of an upside to it for the lads, so that it's not just all fume or all analysis of disappointment. One way or the other, we've had a wonderful win in the most dramatic circumstances possible tonight. We'll take that, I guess, every single time, and twice on a Sunday. This was raw. I've been Trev Downey. You heard Karl Matchett. You heard Mo Chatra. Guy Drinkle has produced, and we'll be back with you very soon, again and again and again.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this Anfield Index show. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel so future podcasts find their way to your device automatically. There's nothing quite like fan engagement, and we'd love to know what you think of anything discussed on this show. The best way to get in touch is over on our free Discord community, where both podcasters and listeners debate the hottest LFC topics 24/7. Sign up free now at AnfieldIndex.com/Discord. You won't regret it. You can also follow us on Twitter at Anfield Index, and find us on Facebook by searching for Anfield Index. Oh, and before you go, we'd love it if you could leave us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast app. It only takes a couple of seconds, and it means the world to the people who create these free shows.